Okay, בסדר. אז מה we holding? אנחנו אוחזים עכשיו, אנחנו holding at the end of חלק ד', פרק זין. We're now up to Ois Vov. Okay?
Yeah.
So we've talked about Shabbos. We've talked about the different Yomim Tovim. Again, what's important is, in English, yeah, is that right? Yeah. What's important, Shulam, is English okay? Shulam, is English okay?
All right. Yes, for sure.
All right.
For sure.
So we've talked about what was very important was that the Ramchal said that the whole Inyan of Shvisa, on the different madregas of Shvisa we have, Shvisa, a total Shvisa on Yom Kippur, less Shvisa on Shabbos, and less on Yom Tovim, less on Chol HaMoed, and less on Rosh Chodesh. They're all, as you say in Ivrit, behet'em kedusha. That means there are ways the Shvisa is there to prepare yourself to be able to get the Kedusha of the day. That's what the Shvisa is for. The Shvisa is a preparation to be able to get the Kedusha of the day. Okay, that's where we sit till now. Now we're coming on to learning about the Yom Tovim Bifrat. Now it's like this. Milvada Kiddush Hazeh, and Nisho b'madregoisov, kfi madreges Kedushas HaYomim. Besides the Shvisa, which the Shvisa is there on all these different days of Yom Tov, kfi the Kedusha, the Darg of those days, yesh oid inyonim protim miyuchodim, kol zman mizmanim eilol kfi inyonim. Besides the Shvisa, which there is on Yom Tovim, and the Shvisa there is on Shabbos, there are halachas, special halachot miyuchadot, which there are on each chag for itself, the fee in your name of the chag. The sheirish kulam. What's the sheirish of all of them? Huseda shesidro hachochma elyoina, shekol tikon shenitkon, voigodl sheheye bezman meazmanim, beshuv tkufas azman ahu, yoir oleinu oir mein oir arishon. That means like that. This is a very important thing. Before we had the Zoya and the Kabbalah, as long as it was going with them, before that, the understanding was that the Yomim Tovim were to commemorate something that happened. In the same way that today you'll set up an andalta, as they call it, a monument to commemorate what happened. Or you make an Independence Day to commemorate the Day of Independence, or you do Guy Fawkes Day in England to commemorate Guy Fawkes. So also Yomim Tovim is a zikorim, remembrance that we should always remember those days that happened once. That was the normal way. That was until we got Teiras HaKabbalah. That's what we understood. Comes Teiras HaKabbalah and he turns the whole thing completely around. In the Teiras HaKabbalah, it's this. In the calendar that we have, there are certain days, certain moments where there are special horrors min hashamayim. In the same way that you'd call it Kedusha, there's a higher Kedusha and a less Kedusha. That's a very general way of saying it, which is true. I mean, Yom Kippur is a higher Kedusha than Shabbos. It's Shabbos Shabbosai. Shabbos is Shabbos. Then you have Yom Tovim, which is less. The Kedushas are less. But in Kabbalah, there's not only more or less. In Kabbalah, it's much more refined. It means in the Kabbalah, what happens is you have oiros, which come from specific, what's called atzufim or spheros. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and literally guides the world, and it continuously creates the world continuously shines of his aura to us through midos of Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And these midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are very refined. Every midah is a different sort of aura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. An example, just an example. To talk about the extremes. If you have Tisha B'Av, so there's Midas Hadin. Midas Hadin is the Gvuros of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Midas Hadin is mayor on the world. On the days of Av, Midas Hadin is Shailit on the world. A specific Midah is Shailit on the world. Now, we understand this Bigadol, is Midas Hadin, or Midas Chesed. Even that is refined. 5 different forms of Midas HaChesed, 5 different forms of Midas Hadin, and within those, more and more and more and more and more refined oiros. Now, in the Zoya and the Arizal, Shimba Yechoy in the Zoya and the Arizal afterwards, discuss exactly which ha'oros, which oiros come on a specific time. 1 second, let me just start. Good evening. Just 1 minute. I'll just go over it again. 1 second. In the Zoya, the Arizal afterwards, there's an enormous amount written on which form of Eire specifically, what ha'ora there was specifically at specific times. I mean, Gadol. So let's say you're talking about the Yomim Tovim. The Yomim Tovim was not just that at a certain time, let's say, they were let out of Mitzrayim, which is true. It was the time that were let out of Mitzrayim. But there was specific oiros, specific, not talking about the extent of the Kedusha. I'm not talking about the amount of the Kedusha, but a specific form of oiros and a specific form of Kedusha which was given at that time. Each Yontef, each time of this year, we'll call it the Galgal of the calendar. Yes, the Ramchal calls it Seder Shetzidra Chochma Elyono. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Masada in the calendar certain days where there was certain horror. That means on the time that there was, let's say, Pesach, there was a specific horror at that time, which that horror enabled the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, at the time of Sukkot, there was a specific horror which enabled the din of Sukkot. And so also Shavuos, and so also all the Chagim. All the Chagim are really, it's not just to commemorate what was once. It's far beyond that. You today are living again. At this point of time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has put in the calendar that there will be the same horror that there was the went. It's as if once HaKadosh Baruch Hu opened up the door and allowed those oiros to come through at a specific time. So every single year when you get to that date, the same oiros will come again and they will shine upon us. Now, but that does not mean that you will be Zoicha to be within those oiros. That means for Klal Yisrael at the time then, to be Zoicha to Yetzias Mitzrayim, there had to be in a certain madrega. There had to be in a certain position. For Klal Yisrael to be Zoicha to Matan Torah, there was specific Tnoim on Klal Yisrael in order to get it. So also today, when it comes to the time of Pesach, when it comes to the time of Shavuos, when it comes to the time of Sukkot, we have to prepare ourselves to be able to be Zoicha to the oiros which Klal Yisrael was Zoicha then. So again, this is again, in the same way that the Shvisa enables you to be able to be Zoicha to the Kedusha of Shabbos, or the Kedusha of Yom Tov, or the Kedusha of Chol Hamoed, or the Kedusha of Rosh Chodesh. So also, the specific form in which that Kedusha takes on each and every Chag, to be able to be zeicha to that form of Kedusha, you have to keilu, relive and put yourself on the madrega they were then. So again, the mitzvahs hayoim is like the shvisa. It's mitzvahs hayoim which are mutal on you to enable you to be zeicha to those ayres. In the same way that the shvisa enables you to be zeicha to the shvisa. Okay. Good evening, Reb Chaim.
Hello, my apologies. Oh,
For, to illustrate what I'm talking about, the Rambam in Moed Nevuchim, Perek Mem Gimel, the Rambam discusses the Chagim. It's a Perek Mem Gimel is the Perek of the Chagim. So the Rambam is coming to explain to us why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why he wanted these Chagim, and what he made us do in the Chagim. So each and every one of them has a logical explanation for it. I'll give you the most clear. That means, first of all, the general idea of it is to commemorate that which was once. So Pesach is to commemorate Yitzias Mitzrayim and the Geula. Pesach in Yonei Mefursam. Pesach in Yonei Mefursam. It's to enable, in order to celebrate the Geula, to celebrate the fact that we were Bnei Chayrim, b'chulei, b'chulei. Sukkot has got a bit of a problem with him, because on Sukkot, it's not the same date as it was then by Klal Yisrael. So again, comes Sukkot, and he has a logical explanation. He says, listen, Sukkot time is the time when the harvest comes in.
yeah.
Sorry? Sukkot is the
okay.
time that the harvest, you collect the harvest. So there's a time of simcha on the streets. The chinuch adds on Sukkot in the streets. They've got like a carnival. It's carnival time, and everyone's getting drunk in the streets, and all the terrible things are happening. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a simcha of Sukkot. That means commemorate. Use your simcha now for Sukkot. Again, a logical explanation why on a certain date HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this Chag. Rosh Hashanah was given because it was the first year it's the beginning of the new year. Again, New Year was something in every religion they understood it. So we also have a New Year, on New Year's Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is 10 days afterwards. It's the Kapora, the Chulei. Everything has a wonderful logical explanation. But the basics of it is to commemorate events that were once. That means in the same way that there's Independence Day, in the same way there's Guy Fawkes Night, we have our Jewish Yom Tovim, which commemorate past events. That was all until the Kabbalists came onto the screen. Once we got the Kabbalists, once the Zohar was Nisgala, and then afterwards the Arizal, it got a completely different understanding to it. And that's what the Ramchal is going to talk about now. According to it's written in the Zohar, besides the fact that there's days of Kedusha, as the Ramchal said beforehand, Yomim Tovim, Shabbos, Chol HaMoed, Yom Kippur, each one with its own different shvisa, which prepares us to get the Kedusha. But every single Chag has a different form of Kedusha. The form of Kedusha that it has is different. What does that mean? In the same way that you have Chesed and Gvura, that means you take Tisha B'Av, the month of Av is a month of Dinim. Tisha B'Av, we don't do business, we try not to go to courts, because Midas HaDin is shaded on the world. There's times when Midas HaChesed is shaded on the world. But it's much, much, much more refined. In the Zohar, it's far more refined exactly which form of Ha'orah, which form of light HaKadosh Baruch Hu shined on any specific time. very, very refined, where exactly it comes from, what sort it is. And every chag, not only do the chagim have different forms of, not only do they have different levels of kedusha, that you have Yom Kippur, which is enormous amount of kedusha, the Yom Tovim was less, but every yontif has a different form of kedusha. It has a kedusha which is specific and unique for that day. That means on the day, an example, on the day of Yitzias Mitzrayim, the time of the Geula, at that point of time, there was enormous kedusha. It said, in fact, it was the lashon of the Zohar was that the midah which HaKadosh Baruch Hu used to bring about the Geula was a midah called a Tika Yomin. It was a midah which is nothing to do with us. It was kilu completely from HaKadosh Baruch Hu with no input from us whatsoever. That means it was the one time of the year, Pesach was the one time of the year where there was a unique form of oil of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which was nothing to do with Klal Yisrael. There was no input on them. It came completely from up, nothing from us. Now, when it comes to that time of the year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it comes to that time of the year, the time of Pesach, the time of Shavuos, the time of Sukkot, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has put in the calendar. It's a metzias in our calendar of our year, that on those days HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows the same horror to shine, the same light to shine on that day that it did all those years ago. You're not here commemorating what there was Pesach. You're here reliving the same eros, the same form of kedusha that Klal Yisrael had on the Leil of Mitzrayim. I'll give you an example, a wonderful example. There's one time of the year, only one time of the year, that we say Hallel on Ma'ariv. Never say Hallel ever on Ma'ariv. There's one time of the year we say Hallel on Ma'ariv. Leila Seder. Leila Seder is the one time of the year that we say we have Hallel or Leila Seder. Says the Leshem. Why? Why? What's the difference? Why? What's different to all other Yom Tovim? Says the Leshem. He bases it on the Torah. Says the Leshem. All other Yomim Tovim, you have to be zeicha to the light. You have to be zeicha to the. No, one minute. I want to finish off one more thing. Says the Amchal, it's the Zohar. The actions that we do on every yontif, the mitzvahs hayoim of every specific yontif, are there to enable us to be zeicha to those oiros they were zeicha then. That means there was to be able to be zeicha to the oiros of Sukkot, we have to do actions which elevate ourselves to being b'mashu the same level that Klal Yisrael were then when they were zeicha to being b'Sukkot station Shivas Yomim. So also Pesach, to be able to be zeicha to Pesach, we have to enable ourselves to be on the madrega they were then. And the same is for Shavuos and everything else. That means that the mitzvahs hayoim, according to Mekubalim, is to enable us to be zeicha to those oiros of them. That means if you want to be zeicha to what they were zeicha to at that time, the only way to be zeicha to it is to bring ourselves to some sort of level. So therefore, every single yontif has its own mitzvahs hayoim, which those mitzvahs prepare us for that day. We're not just commemorating what there was. You're literally reliving that day, reliving those oiros today. But to relive it, you have to prepare yourself. Your preparation is through the mitzvahs hayoim. In other words, the same way that we spoke last week, that the shvisa, the stopping of work or the being mitznatek, when you completely disassociate from your olam hazeh, the shvisa is in order to enable you, to prepare you to be zeicher to the kedusha. I have to be elevated to be able to be zeicher to the kedusha. The shvisa enables me to elevate myself to get the kedusha. So also, every yontif with its specific oiros, the mitzvahs hayom prepare me for it. Now there's a wonderful nafkemina for it, and that's the mitzvah. That's the din of Hallel on Leil Seder. Says the Leshem. What's Hallel for? Hallel is the shira for yontif. Now let's get this straight. We're already Mekubalim. So since we're already Kabbalists, you know that the shira is not just singing shira because once we had something which was, something happened to our forefathers. The shira is when we sing because we are zeicha to the kedusha and the eros of that day. Every hallel is giving shvach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for enabling us yet again this year to be zeicha to the eros of Pesach or the eros of Yom Tov. Says the Leshem. Therefore, you will never find on Sukkot, you will never be able to say the mitzvah hallel till you've done the mitzvahs hayoim. Only after you've taken the lulav, where the mitzvahs hayoim have elevated you to become some shaykh to the kedusha of the day, then you can say hallel. Therefore, at Sukkot, you take the netilas lulav, you make the bracha on the lulav, and straight away afterwards you say hallel. Until that moment that you've done the netilas lulav, you're not yet capable to be zeicher to the eros of this day. Says the Leshem. But that's all on a normal yontif, where on Sukkot and all these days, Klal Yisrael elevated themselves to be zeicher to get those eros. Therefore, so also we today have to elevate ourselves, and that's through the mitzvah hayom. Says the Leshem, Leil Seder, Leil Yetzias Mitzrayim was the one time of the year, the one time in the history of Klal Yisrael and they got something even though they weren't deserving. It wasn't because of the avoid of Klal Yisrael that they were to the Gula. They were in Memteh Shari Tumo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it miatusad. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it from Lemalo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it all from himself without Klal Yisrael at all. Says the Leshem, therefore, on Pesach's the one time of the year that even without mitzvah yoim, the minute it's Ma'ariv, the minute Nacht has happened, you can straight away say Hallel. Because the Kedusha is Chal straight away. Straight away. And by the way, it's a wonderful pshat. There's a pshat in the Torah, the Leshem. But by the way, just between me and you, there's a new minig which was started I don't remember it ever in England, but a new minig here in Eretz Yisrael by some, that they daven Ma'ariv early. Leil Seder, because they want the little kids to have a good time, so they take Ma'ariv in early, and they take it like, you take Shabbos in early, and then they go much more time to do the Leil Seder. Yeah? Wonderful. It's absolute amaratzis. Why they can't say the Hallel before night? Even normally you can't say Hallel before the mitzvah sayoim. On Leila Seder, Kodesh Baruch Hu says like this: the moment, night of the 14th Leil Yudalet, Leil Tzvov Yetzias Mitzrayim, the night itself has a kedusha, without your actions. But it has to be the night. If not, how do you say Hallel? That means, so I said to them, even if the whole year you can take in Yom Tov early and take Shabbos early, wherever you want. There's one time in the year which you can't take it early. And when's that? Leil Pesach. Because if you take it in early, you can't say Hallel. Any case. But what comes out is like this. According to the Kabbalists, according to Mekubalim, there's a whole sugya here. There's a sugya of Yomim Tovim. Every Yontav we have to understand in which way the Maisim, the mitzvahs hayoim, relate specifically to this form of Kedusha which happened on that day. Because the purpose of the mitzvahs hayoim of every day is in order to elevate us and to prepare us to be zoicha to get that Kedusha. So there's a whole new sugi here. If you look in the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, it's going to give you logical reasons why we commemorate the remembrance for certain historical events on certain dates in this year. But it's commemorating events. It's an anbata. It's a commemorating an event. It's a zichroin. It's a zeicha. According to the Mekubalim, it's not a zeicha. It's reliving that Kedusha. You're coming to a tachana. What's a tachana in English? You're coming to a, tachana.
Station.
A tachana books. What is it?
Station. A station.
Right. You're coming to, that's it. I'm coming to a station. Each Yontav is a station. That station is a station which gives over certain Kedusha. And there's specific actions needed on that day to be able to enable me to get that Kedusha. That's the sugya which the Ramchal is going to explain. So now let's read from Vav again. Okay, page 160. Now after this Akdoma, will I be able to say what it means? V'ulam, milvad ha-kiddush hazeh, hanish'or b'madreges, kifi madreges Kedusha yomim, besides the Kedusha, which every Yontef and Cholam Moed and Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos and Yom Kippur have different degrees of Kedusha, which those degrees of Kedusha need certain degrees of Shvisa to enable me to get that Kedusha. Yesh oid in yonim protein. Besides the Shvisa, there's mitzvahs hayoim, the specific halachas and mitzvahs, miyuchodim lokol zman me'azmanim eile, kifi in yonah. Each time is mechayev. Each time needs. Each time requires. At that specific time, different actions to bring about, to enable us to be zeicha to the different forms of Kedusha. V'shoyresh kulam, the shoyresh of them all, who seder shesidra chochma elyono. It's a specific seder in the calendar, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu put. Shekol tikun shenitkan, any takona in history, any major takona, and I'm not about takona what we did, any takona that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did. HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed a specific oiros to be mesaken specific things in the world. V'oir godel, there were specific oiros of Kedusha which were needed. Sheheye bizman me'azmanim, which these different times represent different oiros which were shone on those days. B'shuv tukufas azmanu, when that time comes back, the same date in the calendar comes back. It's a station of Kedusha. It's literally, it's like, you have a petrol station, which you have to plug yourself in and put in petrol. This is Kedusha stations. There's a specific form of Kedusha, which each day of the Yom Tovim gives. It's a station for specific order. And in order that oil, b'shuv tkufas azmanahu, when the time comes back, yoir oleinu oir me'eino oir erishin, the day will shine with something similar to the oil that shone on that day. Chudash, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu will bring back and be mechadish toiledes hatikunahu b'misha kiblu. It's not, toiledes means, don't think for 1 minute you're getting the enormous light of the Geula of Mitzrayim. But it's a me'en. You're getting some derivative, some form of small oil. But what's that oil called? is the oil of the Seder. It's the oil of Yetzias Mitzrayim. The oil of Sukkot. V'hine, apize means because of this. It's got to be because of what I've explained to you. Nitztaveinu b'chag HaPesach b'chol ha'inyonim shenitztaveinu lezecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. We've been mitzvah on the day of Chag HaPesach in all these inyonim, which are zeicher the Yetzias Mitzrayim. But it's not just to commemorate a occasion that happened one, but ki biyois hatikun ahu tikun gadol moed shenistaknu boy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made something, I'll give you an example. You can imagine an earthquake, a tsunami, a gigantic tsunami in the physical world. Chag HaPesach, Yetzias Mitzrayim, was a gigantic tsunami in the Ruchnius world. It was an enormous change, something Yitzedoifen. And that oil was enormous. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, that oil, I'm going to keep that oil all the years. All the 6,000 years of Klal Yisrael in this world, that oil will exist in a smaller form. But it will exist, and you have to reconnect in some form to the Madrega of them. Says the Ramchal, Ki biyois ha'tikun tikun gadol moed shenitaknu boy u'k'may shezachanu lamalo hukva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was kivea, established, shebeshuv tkufas hazman hahu, when that time comes back every year, yo'ir oleinu oir me'eno oir she'eya boy. There will be me'en, that's unbelievable spiritual oir, the oir of the Geula. Utachudash bonu, and there will be mitchadesh in us, toiledes oisei tikun, a smaller form of that tikun. But ve'alkein, and therefore, itchayavnu bo'ison and yonim kulam. Don't think it comes tam. To be zeicher to those oiros. There's a mitzvah hayoim, and the mitzvahim have to be mat'im. They have to be suitable. They have to be given in a form which is specific for each and every time. But there's a Chag HaShmuz L'Matan Torah, the Chag HaSukkos, L'Inyan Anoni HaKovod. Afi she'ein ois hazman befrat. Here already the Ramchal says, Anoni HaKovod and Sukkos are not on the same time. But even though they're not on the same date, as the Goyen talks about in Shir Hashirim, Ela shekova Torah Chag zichron inyan zeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a chiddush. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was keveh a specific date, even though that's not the same day that it happened. U'k'mo shekosu ki bezukas hashavti, v'kein Chanukah v'chein Purim. V'al derech zeh hoyu koili Megillas Tainis. So also there was Megillas Tainis. El shenis batlu ifnei shelo hoyu Yisrael l'cheim lamoidem. V'niftu miyos oisim zeicher lehem l'soirus oiram be'er. So now the Ramchal's really coming to his, this is really where it all comes to. He's going to start going through the Yomim Tovim, trying to give us as far as he can, because it's a Kabbalistic ideas. He's going to try and explain to us, the layman, in some form, that we should understand the specific oiros that are made on the Chagim, and the actions that we need to do to prepare us to be able to be zeicher to the Zayres. So let's just start with Chometz and Matzah. Inen a Chometz v'Matzah. By the way, all these things, the Ramchal's not machadesh anything. All these things, he's literally just writing to the layman. It's the first sefer which gave over Kabbalistic ideas in a form that even us normal people can have some sort of grasp in it. But this is really, I mean, and if you look in the Arizal's got Sefer Kavonos. Sefer Kavonos is every single, not only davening a Shabbat, mostly Shabbos and all the Yomim Tovim, is going through every single Yom Tov exactly, an enormous arichas on the specific kavanas which are needed for every single Yom Tov, and for every time of the day of Yom Tov, and for every day of Yom Tov. Because every day represents a different oir, which is meir on us. And therefore, there, the Arizal is not only talking about the Maisa mitzvahs, he's talking about the kavanas of tefillah. The kavanas of tefillah are to be meir, to enable us to be zeicha to the oiros of this specific time. So, the Ramchal is not here going to go into the details, not in the kavanas of the tefillah, not in the kavanas of the mitzvah. He's going to give us a general idea of what were the specific oiros of Pesach, and what is the why do the actions of the mitzvah sayoim prepare us for those oiros? So let's do Pesach. Inen chometz v'matzah. What does chometz and matzah got to do? Again, the question is, why does that prepare us for the oiros? Don't forget, we're not commemorating what happened then. If we were commemorating what happened then, no problem. Chometz and matzah, they ate chometz in Mitzrayim, the last days of Mitzrayim, they ate matzah, and when they left, they didn't have time for the matzahs to cook, for bread to cook, and therefore they ate unleavened bread. That means, if you're asking me, historically, chometz and matzah, the reason why we don't eat chometz and we eat matzah is to commemorate Mashalo Yispiku. Klal Yisrael didn't manage to prepare the bread when they went out to Mitzrayim. But again, in the Kabbalistic world, there's no just doing actions because that's what happened once. We're not commemorating an event. We're preparing ourselves today for the specific kedusha, the specific oiros of Pesach. So which way does stopping eating chometz and eating matzah, how does that symbolize and prepare us for the specific oiros that were then? Yeah. As Jeff says, no idea. That's why we need the Arizal and the Zoya. And the Ramchal, who puts it down to us in some sort of way that we can grasp it. V'hine. Inen chometz v'matzahu. Kine ad yitzias Mitzrayim, ha Yisrael mo'iravim b'shah umeis. Goy bekerev goy. Now in the Zoya, yes, goy bekerev goy does not just mean, by the way, goy bekerev goy does not just mean they were amongst the goyim. That's not what it is. Goy bekerev goy in the Zoya, it's many times you see it. Goy bekerev goy means they were literally fagoished. Fagoish does not mean they didn't dress well, they dressed like goyim, and they talk like goyim. It means they were be'etzem. The mahut.
Assimilated.
No, Jeff, no. Not just assimilated, no. They, I told you about the Stipler. The Stipler always says, and we spoke about before in the Ramchal, a Yiddish is nicht kan goy. There is doimim chayo, this doimim tzemeh chayo v'daber. It says the Kuzari, there's Yisrael. Yisrael's not just a Jewish guy. Yisrael is something else. He might look like it. The Ramchal says before, we might look like the goyim, but we ain't the goyim. We're spiritual beings. That means a goy can fast. The monks can be celibate. Celibate, is that the word? They can be celibate. In fact, the ones in India can lie on top of, the pins, those needles for 12 years and not speak to a living human being and not eat and be totally in a meditative thing. And they come out and they're still stick flesh, a piece of meat. There might be a thin piece of meat with lots of holes in their back because they've been lying on pins and needles for the last 10 years. They're a piece of meat. They will never become a yitzur ruchani. They'll never become a spiritual being. That is Klal Yisrael. So in the Zoya, goy bekerev goy is not assimilation. It's not that they looked like the goyim. It means they were fleshik and meat. They did not achieve, they were not yet that madrega of being a spiritual being. That means they couldn't reach up. They couldn't elevate themselves. Whatever they did, they were goy bekerev goy. Now says the Ramchal, listen. Hine nachomet v'amatzahu. Hine ad yitzias Mitzrayim ho Yisrael mu'rovim b'sha'ar umos. Goy bekerev goy. B'yitziosam, when they left. Nigalu v'nivdolu. They were redeemed and they were separated. I think we've spoken many, many times about it. In the Zoya describes the whole of Yitzias Mitzrayim is a leido. It's a birth. Mitzrayim, says the Zoya, is from Loshen Meitza. Meitza. What's Meitza? Like a womb. It's a channel. The womb is a compact place. It's a place where there's no room. It's called Meitza. Says the Zoya. Mitzrayim is Miloshen Meitza. It's like a womb. And the Yitzias Mitzrayim was a birth. That means Yitzias Mitzrayim wasn't just a redemption. It was a creation. Klal Yisrael were recreated. Beforehand, they were a shtik flesh. And they became something else. Nigalu v'nivdalu. Now carry on. Vine. Ad oisoi hazman, until the time of the Geula, hayu kol b'chinos gufos b'nei Odom chashuchos b'choshech v'zumo. Shoim is gabaleim. The b'chinos of the goof of people, and b'nei Odom is including Klal Yisrael, were chashuch, was darkness, and zuamo, filth. Shoim is gabaleim. That means they were, you know what they were? You want to know what happens after 20 years that a monk is celibate, or 20 years that the guru in India lies on his pills? He comes out, he's a bit cleaner, but he's still a shtik zuamo. That's what they were. They were zuamo. Ubeyetzir, when they left Mitzrayim, nivdelu Yisrael. V'nimtzu gufoisom litoer. Their bodies were cleansed. There was a recreation. They were nivru michodosh and they were nivru tohirim. Ulehizdamein. They were there with the preparation, the Torah of Avodah. They were prepared to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Klal Yisrael were reborn in a new form, a form of Torah which prepared them to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'hainu, I says like this. Ulinyan zed itztavu, for this was the Kedusha. You want to know what oir was the oir that was meir on Pesach? It wasn't just, we call it Zman HaGeula. And it was Zman HaGeula. But it was much more than that. There was an oir that Kodesh Baruch Hu was meir, which was the oil which was metaher, cleansed the gashmias of Klal Yisrael. That means the physicality, the gashem, the physicality of Klal Yisrael went through a cleansing process. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mezakech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was, how to say mezakech in English?
Purifying.
What? He, not just purified, no. It's not just purified. He refined the Gashmias. The Gashmias was refined to get more, to be more ruchani, to be able to be zeicha to avoid to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was a geula and a rebirth, but do you understand this? A rebirth of the Gashmias into a more refined form to be able to get ruchnias. Says the Ramchal, chometz and matzah are to be zeicha to those oiros that Kodesh Baruch Hu was meir, which refined the human being. That means it's a new understanding. You're sitting on Pesach. What am I commemorating? Of course, I'm commemorating the Geula. But I want to be zeicha to the oiros that were then, which were oiros which refined the gashmias. There were oiros which were meyuched, which refined the gashmias to enable it to be more ruchani. Those are the oiros of this day. Let's call it the rebirth process. A rebirth process to be able to be zeicha to ruchnias. He says, chometz and matzah is for that. Right, now he's going to explain. For this reason, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to stop with eating chometz and eating matzah. V'hainu, kinei halechem shehuchan nimzoin ha'odom hu mishtaveh be'emet el matzav haniutz b'odom. You know, Chazal says many times that bos of a mayim, lechem and mayim are the basics which enable the continuity of the world. The basic food which enables life is lechem and mayim. Correct? Lechem and mayim. That's why the basic mozin is lechem. That's why we have a special bichas mozin on lechem. Lechem is that which sustains physical life. World. So if I look for a meichel, something that we eat, which is the most basic, which represents humanity, that would be lechem and odom. Odom and lechem. Lechem is a basic food which enables odom to live. Says the Ramchal, lechem and odom have a common idea behind them. What's the common idea? He says, halechem shehuchan limzoin odom mishtaveh bemet matzav hanirtza b'odom. It compares to the situation which HaKadosh Baruch Hu put man in this world. What does that mean? Inyan achimutz, the fact that lechem, the fact that you have emach, it rises. Yes, shu dover tivi belechem. It's something which is natural in lechem. By the way, it doesn't make the food more healthy. I mean, if you eat matzahs, I mean, it could be putting on more weight. But it doesn't make it more. It's not part of the basic grains. It doesn't sustain you more. I mean, matzah, lechem doesn't sustain you more than matzah. But what does it do? It's dover tivi belechem sheliyeh kalo equal v'teivatam. It enables you to digest it better, and it enables it to taste better. And that is similar. That's similar to human beings. Odom needs the Yetzer Hara. He needs the Yetzer Hara. That means man needs the Yetzer Hara. It says, he also needs the Yetzer Hara because without the Yetzer Hara, he's got no Mechoma. His whole purpose in this world is only to combat the Yetzer Hara. So he has to have the Yetzer Hara. He has to have it. But the Yetzer Hara, that means he has to have Gashmias. You have to have Gashmias. Why? Because otherwise, can't live. We'll talk about this more next week. He says, the chimutz represents Gashmias in the fact that it's easier to eat. It's nicer to have. It's the nice part of the world. Which the nice part of the world, by the way, even though they might shoot me for it, but God did not demand for you to suffer in this world. No. The Ramchal talks about it later. No. God wants you to have a good time. Go and have food. It should be tasty. But you have to understand that the tasty food, is only Gashmias. It's Gashmias. In the same way that there were oiros on the day of Pesach, what was that oil? Which refined the Gashmias. The oil which enabled the person to be more ruchani, to be able afterwards, Klal Yisrael, to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So also we refrain from eating, let's call it, the Gashmias part of the lechem. Lechem is needed to eat. But that which is above our needs to live, that which is above that, that's just Gashmias, which we can do without. God says, I don't want you to do without it. I want you to eat decent. I want you to be happy. But once a year, I want you to refrain from the Gashmias, which is not needed. Because when you refrain from the Gashmias, which is not needed, so you're elevating yourself onto a madrega where you'll be zeicha, where you can be zeicha to those oiros of Pesach, which were the oiros which enabled the gufa Adam to get ruchnias more than Gashmias. That means, what were the oiros of Pesach? They were oiros of refined Gashmias. The Gashmias got refined to such a level they could be zeicha to ruchnias. So also we refrain from eating Gashmias, which is not necessary in the Leil on Pesach. Through that, we elevate ourselves to be able to be zeicha to those oiros of Seder, of Pesach, which were oiros of refined Gashmias. We eat refined Gashmias. We refrain from eating all Gashmias. We zeicha to a refined form of uf, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave in the day of Pesach. We'll carry it on next week in Mitzvah Hashem. It's married now here. A wonderful idea. It's wonderful.
Wonderful. Brilliant.
And it just gets better. It just gets better.
Looking forward.
Agite Nacht.
Good night. Good night, Rab Chaim.
Shkoyach.
Hayach Gadol.